Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Max returned to his peaceful lakeside cabin, he expected silence. He got war. A gleaming metal garage stood 18 feet onto his land, built by a smug HOA queenpin. But Max was no ordinary neighbor. He had maps, law, and vengeance on his side. This wasn't a dispute. This was war. I came back to my lakeside property in Silver Gray, Oregon, expecting two things: peace and quiet. 2 weeks in Seattle working on a freelance engineering report had left me tired, grumpy, and badly in need of solitude. My cabin stood just beyond the tree line, nestled in 4 acres of pine and alder that sloped gently down toward the lake. I'd bought the land 8 years ago, cash, after leaving the Navy. It was perfect. No HOA, no nosy neighbors, just me, the forest, and the water. So imagine my face when I drove up the gravel path and saw a brand new metal structure planted squarely along my southern boundary, big enough to house a fishing boat and an ATV trailer side by side. Shiny aluminum siding, fresh poured slab, painted trim, and right on the door, bolted with smug pride, a weatherproof sign that read, Lakeside Breeze Community Utility Bay. For authorized use only. I put the truck in park and just sat there staring. It wasn't a shed. It was a full-blown garage, a damn warehouse, and it was on my land. I walked the boundary following the flagged markers I'd installed myself years ago. Permanent state-certified survey caps, all placed by the book. I was a licensed land surveyor, after all. I knew exactly where my property ended. This thing wasn't straddling the line. It was planted 18 feet inside it. The first neighbor I found was Craig Summers, a pale guy in cargo shorts who lived just down the slope. He was outside cleaning his kayak. When he saw me, he froze. "Hey, Max," he said. Didn't know you were back." "Apparently," I said flatly, nodding toward the structure. "Who the hell authorized that?" Craig shifted uncomfortably, glancing around like we were being watched. "Look, I don't know all the details. Karen said, well, she said you hadn't been around in months. She told everyone the southern edge was kind of a gray area. She had a map." I didn't bother responding. I walked straight back to the house, grabbed my documentation binder from the safe, and called the county sheriff's department. A deputy named Greenfield came out within the hour. Good guy. Local. Knew the difference between private property and collective fantasy. When I showed him the recorded plat map and the official survey records filed with the Clatsop County Recorder's Office, he whistled low. "Yeah, this looks locked in," he said. "That garage is definitely on your land. Did you give them permission?" "No," I said. "Never. I didn't even know it existed until 10 minutes ago." Greenfield took photos, made some notes, and said he'd talk to the HOA. I told him good luck. Talking to Karen Murray was like trying to reason with a hurricane in a pantsuit. Sure enough, she showed up later that evening, dressed like she was going to a garden club mixer, oversized hat, clipboard, pastel vest, that signature smirk, like the whole world owed her a trophy for existing. "Max," she said like we were old friends, "you're back." "No thanks to you. That monstrosity on my land. Care to explain?" Karen blinked innocently. "That's community infrastructure, Max. You've been gone so long, and frankly, there was confusion about the boundary. Our map indicates that the South Shore portion was historically part of Lakeside Breeze." I held up the plat map. "This is recorded, certified, filed, and legally binding. Your map is toilet paper." Karen's eyes narrowed. "There's no need to be hostile. You weren't here. The land was overgrown. The HOA voted to make use of what appeared to be unclaimed utility space." "Funny," I said, "because last I checked, unclaimed utility space doesn't come with my name on the deed." She smiled. "If you have concerns, take it up with the board." "I will," I said. "In court." As she turned to leave, she added, "Max, this community thrives on cooperation. I hope you won't be difficult." I watched her walk off like she owned the goddamn lake, but I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calculating. That garage wasn't just an eyesore, it was an invitation to war, and I intended to bring the entire legal toolbox with me. The next morning, I wasn't sipping coffee on my deck like usual. I was on the phone with a private surveying firm in Astoria, laying out exactly what I needed: an emergency boundary verification, full site scan, and a certified report I could wave in court like a loaded shotgun. They squeezed me in for later that day, By 3 in the afternoon, 2 guys showed up in a dusty white van, lugging a Leica total station and a high-precision GPS rover. I gave them the original plat, the previous survey logs, and walked the perimeter with them while venting. They didn't say much, just did their job. When the chief tech finally looked up from his screen, he said, "Yeah, you're not crazy. That garage is on your land, 18 feet in. Whoever built that thing didn't even try to check setback codes." "That's because they didn't care," I muttered. By the next day, I had their official report in hand, signed, stamped, and cross-referenced with the Clatsop County GIS records, or at least what should have been the GIS records. When I pulled up the public GIS portal to compare coordinates, I froze. Something didn't match. According to the county's online map, the southern boundary of my lot didn't follow the certified coordinates. It was shifted, subtly, but enough to make it look like the garage barely grazed the edge of my land. Which it didn't. The real data said otherwise. I cross-checked the shapefiles. Someone had tampered with the GIS entry. The metadata for the latest map revision showed an update from 7 months ago, done by a consultant logged under the username K. Murray External. My blood turned to ice. Karen had actually filed a false correction to the public property record. That wasn't just dishonest. It was criminal. I printed everything: the survey, the screenshots, the metadata logs. Then I drove straight to the Clatsop County Land Committee office and filed a formal complaint for fraudulent alteration of recorded boundaries, attaching all my evidence. The clerk raised her eyebrows so high they nearly vanished into her hairline. "Sir, this is not something we see every day." "I'd imagine not," I said. "But you're about to see it go to court." That afternoon, I filed suit in county civil court. Unauthorized construction, unlawful encroachment, damages for loss of use, and injunctive relief. My attorney, Russ McCarthy, a no-nonsense guy with a jaw like a cinder block, told me I had a strong case, especially once he saw the GIS forgery. "This isn't just some HOA squabble," he said. "She altered public data to steal land. That's state-level fraud." I nodded, and I want it all on the record, every inch. We served Karen that same week. Her reaction, pure theater. She marched right up my driveway, waving the court notice like it was a parking ticket, and shouted, "You're seriously suing me? Over what? A glorified carport?" I didn't even answer. I just closed the door in her face. But I knew Karen wouldn't roll over. 2 days later, her lawyer filed a response claiming the garage was a temporary utility fixture built with implied consent due to neighbor abandonment. Implied consent. Because I was gone for 2 weeks? She really thought she could gaslight the justice system. She also didn't expect me to play offense. That Friday, I requested a preliminary injunction to freeze further use of the garage until the case was resolved. The court granted it. That meant HOA members couldn't store so much as a rake inside. But when I checked on the building later that evening, the padlock had been replaced, and the parking lot out front was full of trailers and gear. I took pictures of every plate and tag I saw. My patience had expired. If Karen thought this was about pride, she was wrong. This was about ownership and the lengths I was willing to go to defend it. I didn't wait long to follow up on the injunction violation. Monday morning, I was in front of the county clerk's window filing a motion for contempt of court. Alongside it, I submitted the photos of the fresh padlock and all the boats, trailers, and ATVs neatly packed into my garage. The judge didn't need convincing. By midweek, the court had issued an order demanding the HOA cease all activity on the structure and provide documentation of ownership and usage. Karen naturally stonewalled. Her lawyer filed a vague affidavit claiming the equipment inside was temporarily placed for storm protection. Storm protection. It hadn't rained in over 3 weeks. That's when I had Russ dig deeper. We sent a formal discovery request to the HOA's financial administrator, demanding records of all payments and rental agreements related to the utility bay. At first, they resisted, claimed they had no obligation to provide irrelevant materials. So Russ got a subpoena. 2 weeks later, the package arrived. When I opened the file, I actually laughed. Over the last 8 months, Karen had been renting out my land. She'd signed at least 9 storage agreements with residents from Lakeside Breeze, most at $450 a month, billed under Community Storage Support Fund. Neatly itemized, too. There were receipts, digital transfers, notes from Karen like Max's South Edge, underutilized long-term support. She really wrote that. In total, she'd pulled in over $14,000. 14 grand. While I was out working to keep the lights on, she was running a racket on my soil. Even worse, one of the rental agreements included a line that read, "Property under HOA easement jurisdiction. Owner currently unresponsive." I called the listed renter, Brian Newell, a semi-retired guy with a fishing boat and a labradoodle named Monty. I introduced myself, explained the situation calmly, and asked if he was aware the structure wasn't legally HOA property. "Oh hell," he said. "Karen told us you'd basically abandoned the lot. She said you hadn't paid taxes in years and the community was repurposing it." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Not only were my taxes up to date, I had the receipts framed in my office. Brian sounded genuinely rattled. "Listen, I'll come by and get my stuff out. I don't want trouble." "Appreciate it," I said, "but I'm going to have to issue a formal notice anyway." Nothing personal. I spent the next few hours drafting a legal eviction notice for unauthorized storage, citing trespass statutes, and attaching my survey data. I posted laminated copies on the garage door, emailed the renters directly, and even dropped off a few printed versions at their front doors. No ambiguity, no excuses. The fallout was immediate. 3 of the renters came to retrieve their equipment that same weekend. 2 were sheepish. 1 was pissed off and threatened to take it up with Karen. I encouraged him to do exactly that and to ask where his rent money actually went. As for the garage itself, I padlocked it with a heavy-duty security shackle and installed a motion-triggered camera aimed directly at the entrance. I even posted a laminated sign, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. HOA access prohibited by court order." That night, the camera caught someone trying to snip the lock with bolt cutters. She wore a hoodie, but I'd recognize that stiff, angry gait anywhere. Karen. At one point, she looked straight up at the camera, flipped at the bird, and hissed something I couldn't hear. Probably wasn't have a nice day. The next morning, I handed the footage to Deputy Greenfield. "She's pushing it," he said, jaw tight. "She thinks she owns the place." "Well," he said, "she's about to learn otherwise." The next day, I heard tires crunching on gravel. I looked out and saw a Clatsop County cruiser inching up my driveway. Not unusual, I thought. Deputy Greenfield sometimes stopped by when things escalated, but this wasn't Greenfield. A younger officer stepped out, one hand resting casually on his hip. He looked barely 30, buzz-cut, fresh uniform, the kind of guy who still thought citations solved everything. "Mr. Dell," he asked, checking his notepad. "That's me. We received a report that you allegedly brandished a firearm during a confrontation with a neighbor. I'm going to need to ask you a few questions." I stared at him, not moving. "A firearm?" "Yes, sir. The complainant stated that you threatened her while she was retrieving HOA property." "You mean breaking into my garage at 2 in the morning with bolt cutters?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because I've got footage. Want to see?" He hesitated for a moment. "If you have any recording, that'd be helpful." I led him into the house, pulled up the camera feed, and played the clip. There was Karen, clear as day, yanking on the padlock, mumbling to herself, and then finally turning to the camera and barking out, "I'll have your ass in jail, you freak." The deputy watched silently. When it ended, he let out a long breath. "Okay. Yeah, that doesn't match the report. She told you I threatened her? Claimed you confronted her with a weapon and blocked her from accessing HOA storage. You're looking at the storage, on my land, secured by court order." He nodded. "I'll file a supplemental. Doesn't look like anything criminal occurred, on your part." I could tell he was embarrassed, but not half as embarrassed as Karen should have been. By noon, I'd sent a copy of the footage to Russ, and he immediately filed a motion for retaliatory false report, attaching the video and citing the existing court order. That kind of stunt, weaponizing the police with lies, could backfire hard. Karen didn't show up on my property for a few days after that, but I wasn't naive. I knew she was regrouping. Sure enough, on Friday, I got served with another motion, this time from Karen's attorney, claiming the garage was part of a community easement established by historic use, and that I was obstructing HOA operations. Historic use? What, parking jet skis on someone else's land for 8 months while I was away made it tradition? Russ chuckled when he read it. "She's panicking. She's fabricating." Either way, he said, they're stalling for time. But I wasn't about to sit around while she twisted reality into HOA-flavored legal fiction. That weekend, I printed out the timeline. When I bought the property, the original survey, my tax records, drone photos from before the garage existed, and, most damning, the revised GIS records tied to her login credentials. Russ compiled it all into a formal response, shredding her claims one by one. He also submitted a motion for early summary judgment, citing clear evidence of encroachment, forgery, and economic exploitation. Then, just to add salt, we issued a formal letter of demand for the entire amount of money Karen had collected, plus interest. But I wasn't done. I contacted 3 of the renters again, this time asking for written statements confirming they had paid Karen directly and been told I had abandoned the land. To my surprise, they agreed. One even offered to testify in court. Apparently, once people realized they'd been conned, their HOA loyalty faded fast. I sent out notices to the remaining renters, giving them 48 hours to vacate or face legal action for trespass and storage of personal property on private land. No response. So I hired a local towing and storage outfit. They came on Monday morning and started hauling gear out of the garage, itemizing, photographing, storing it all off-site. I kept receipts for everything. By Tuesday afternoon, the garage was empty. Silent. Just a shiny metal box, sitting awkwardly on land it had no right to occupy. But the silence didn't last long. At midnight, the security camera pinged my phone again. This time, the footage showed Karen walking down the slope toward the lake, flashlight in one hand, something long and metallic in the other. When she got to the garage, she knelt down near the foundation and started, what? Scraping? I couldn't tell. But then I saw sparks. She was trying to cut into the concrete footings, probably trying to make it look temporary before the next court date. I called the sheriff's department immediately. By the time Deputy Greenfield arrived, Karen was already in the back of another cruiser, red-faced and muttering something about community rights and urgent structural corrections. The officer who detained her, a no-nonsense woman with a flat expression, had caught her in the act, sparks flying from an angle grinder as she tried to slice into the base of the garage like some lunatic welder in a heist movie. I watched from my porch, arms crossed, sipping a mug of coffee like it was a damn spectator sport. Greenfield approached me, eyes tired but amused. "You sure know how to keep your weekends exciting, Max." She's lucky I didn't step out there first. If I'd seen that spark show live, I might have called the fire department. He nodded toward the cruiser. "We'll book her for trespass, property damage, and violation of a court order. She'll be out by morning, but this'll help your case." I didn't need her to stay in jail. I needed the pattern of behavior documented, and now it was undeniable. This wasn't some dispute over inches of land. It was a pattern of fraud, aggression, and willful trespassing. Russ agreed. When I sent him the body cam footage and my own clips, he nearly laughed. "Max, you realize this woman just made our job 10 times easier?" She's a case study in how to lose a property dispute, but Karen wasn't done trying. 3 days later, I was served with a cease and desist letter from the HOA board, claiming that my actions were creating community unrest and sabotaging long-standing communal harmony. I almost framed it as a comedy piece. They wanted me to refrain from further aggressive interference in HOA infrastructure until a neutral arbitration board could review the matter. I didn't even dignify it with a response. Russ, however, filed a new motion that very afternoon, this time demanding court-appointed supervision over any and all communications or physical interventions involving the disputed garage. He also requested an emergency protective order, essentially treating the structure like evidence in a criminal case, which, frankly, it now was. Then came the hearing. The courtroom was modest, paneled in dull wood, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet. Karen arrived in a cream-colored suit that probably looked authoritative in her mind, but screamed desperation cosplay to anyone with eyes. Her lawyer, a prickly middle-aged man who looked like he moonlit as a taxidermist, stood up and immediately started spinning. The garage was built under good faith assumptions. The use of the land was misunderstood due to outdated GIS data, and the revenue earned had been held in escrow for the benefit of the community. Held in escrow, that was a new one. Russ stood up, cool as ever, and went point by point. Official GIS records edited under Karen's login, 9 rental agreements signed by Karen, tax payments and surveys showing uninterrupted private ownership, false police report, surveillance footage of criminal activity. He then dropped the bomb, a notarized statement from one of the renters accompanied by a screenshot of a Venmo transfer labeled Garage Space South Lot. It was dated 2 months before I even left for Seattle. The judge leaned back, rubbing his temples. I've rarely seen a more textbook case of encroachment and misrepresentation, he muttered. We'll reconvene next week for ruling. In the meantime, the structure is to remain sealed, and any further entry will result in immediate contempt charges. As we left the courthouse, Karen caught my eye. Her jaw was clenched so tightly, I could see the veins in her neck. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She knew she'd lost the ground, literally and figuratively. But I had a feeling she was still planning something. People like her didn't go quietly. They went clawing, screaming, dragging reputations down with them if they could. And I was just getting started. The garage sat there, gleaming in the morning sun like some smug monument to arrogance. Empty now. Silent. But every time I looked at it, it was like a splinter in my eye. I wasn't about to let it stay longer than necessary. I spent the weekend going through boxes in my shed, digging up every old permit, site plan, and survey map I ever filed since buying the land. I even unearthed the original topo survey I commissioned the week after closing, signed, sealed, notarized, and time-stamped. My ducks were not just in a row, they were wearing marching uniforms. Monday morning, Russ filed the full evidence package to supplement our request for summary judgment. The county court scheduled the next hearing for Thursday. It was shaping up to be the grand finale. And then, right on cue, Karen decided to light another match. Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from a local reporter with the Daily Clatsop. Mr. Dell, care to comment on the HOA allegations? What allegations? That you threatened your neighbors, blocked emergency access, and are unlawfully profiting from shoreline property that was historically communal. We received a statement from the Lakeside Breeze HOA. Would you like to respond before we publish? I nearly dropped my phone. She gave you a statement? Yes, from their communications officer. Let me guess, I said. Her name rhymes with Barron. I hung up, opened my laptop, and sure enough, there it was. A full online article titled Property Owner Sparks Turmoil at Lakeside Breeze, filled with vague accusations, off-the-record comments, and Karen's classic passive-aggressive phrasing, "We only want what's fair. The lake belongs to everyone." The comment section was a mix of bored retirees, HOA loyalists, and people who clearly didn't read past the headline. I didn't have time to argue online. I called Russ, sent him the screenshots, and said, "Add defamation to the list." "You're serious?" "She's spreading false claims in the press. I can prove every word's a lie. She's trying to win in public what she's already lost in court." We issued a cease and desist to the paper, demanded a retraction, and filed a formal motion with the court to include public defamation as part of our damages. Then I went one step further. I wrote a calm, factual letter. It explained point by point what had happened: the property lines, the forged GIS data, the illegal garage, the revenue collected, the court orders violated. I attached images, maps, and video stills, and I emailed it to every homeowner in Lakeside Breeze. It was time the board got a little heat from their own members. By Wednesday, my inbox was on fire. At least a dozen HOA residents responded, some shocked, some apologetic, and 3 who openly admitted they'd been renting space in the community utility garage under Karen's arrangement and had no idea it wasn't legit. One even said, "She told us the original owner died and left it abandoned." That one made me spit out my coffee. Meanwhile, Karen was starting to fray at the seams. Word around the lake was that a special board meeting had been called, unannounced, no minutes, closed doors. Several HOA members told me it was pure damage control, and then I got an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside, a USB drive labeled only with a sticky note that read, "Ask her about this." I plugged it in, scanned for malware, then opened the only video file. It was grainy nighttime surveillance footage, clearly taken from a neighbor's security cam. The angle looked down toward the garage. The timestamp was from 2 weeks earlier. The video showed Karen unlocking the garage and letting in a man with a trailer. They loaded 2 jet skis, a generator, and 3 boxes. They did it in silence, no lights, no talking. I didn't know who sent the footage, but the implication was clear. Karen wasn't just lying. She was still using the garage under the table. After the court order, Russ just whistled when I showed him. That's contempt. Not just civil, criminal. We had everything we needed now. A fraudulent scheme, real damages, defamation, a court order violation, and now evidence of continued illegal activity. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Thursday morning was cold and still, with a fog hanging low over Silver Gray Lake. It felt like the whole shoreline was holding its breath. I put on my cleanest shirt, grabbed my folders, double-checked the USB in my pocket, and headed to the courthouse like I was walking into a boxing ring. I wasn't nervous. I was locked in. Karen had tried everything from lies to lawsuits, and now it was time to pay the bill. The courtroom was fuller than usual. A few residents from Lakeside Breeze sat in the back, whispering and occasionally glaring toward Karen, who looked noticeably less confident than during our first hearing. No HOA logos on her suit this time, just beige and desperation. The judge came in, reviewed the docket, and gave a tired sigh before even hearing arguments. Russ stood and went first. He laid it all out like a closing argument in a trial. The certified survey and topo maps proving the garage was on my land. The GIS database edit log showing Karen's credentials used to alter parcel data. The falsified police report claiming I threatened her. The multiple rental agreements and bank transfers for garage space. The fake community infrastructure claim with no permits, no vote, no contracts. The article sent to the press filled with provably false statements. And now, the video, time-stamped, geolocated, showing Karen violating the standing order, removing personal goods under cover of night. Every single point came with documents, photos, timestamps. Russ had even called in the guy from the county GIS office to testify under oath that Karen had requested login access for data review weeks before construction. Karen's lawyer tried. God, he tried. He stuttered through objections, called the video uncorroborated, claimed miscommunication, outdated maps, even innocent community intentions. But it was like throwing feathers at a freight train. When Karen finally took the stand, she barely spoke. She kept her chin up, but her voice was shaky. When Russ asked if she had board authorization to construct on my land, she dodged. When did you learn the parcel was not HOA property? I believed it always was. Belief is not a boundary, Ms. Murray. The judge didn't interrupt. He just stared at her with that look judges reserve for people who clearly think they're smarter than the law. By mid-afternoon, it was over. The judge didn't even need recess to deliver the verdict. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Dell, the defendant, Ms. Karen Murray, acting on behalf of the Lakeside Breeze HOA, committed unlawful encroachment, deliberate misrepresentation of property boundaries, defamation, and is in contempt of a standing judicial order. He banged the gavel once and rattled off. The penalties like he was reading a grocery list. $96,000 in damages for unauthorized use of land, $38,000 in legal fees and court costs, immediate demolition of the structure at HOA expense under court, supervision, public retraction issued to the press within 7 days, formal notification to the State Real Estate Board regarding misconduct, referral for criminal investigation into GIS fraud, and false police reporting. Karen didn't move. Her face was frozen, pale, like she hadn't expected consequences to ever touch her. Her lawyer just packed up his briefcase like a man already calculating how much of his retainer he was legally required to refund. Outside, the sun had finally broken through the fog. Russ clapped me on the back. You know, he said, some people try to win quietly. You win like a damn sledgehammer. I don't start fights, I said, but I end them properly. Word spread quickly. By that evening, someone from the Lakeside Breeze Board sent me a polite email requesting a meeting to discuss next steps. I didn't reply. I'd seen enough of how they conducted business. The next step was theirs, starting with a check. 3 weeks after the ruling, I stood on the edge of my lot watching a demolition crew dismantle the aluminum-paneled monstrosity that had haunted my shoreline for nearly a year. The HOA, under court order, had hired a third-party contractor. I made sure to be there every single day, sipping coffee from a lawn chair while a county marshal oversaw the work. They had to cut the structure into sections, haul it out piece by piece, and then regrade the soil under supervision of a licensed surveyor. My surveyor. Karen never showed. Probably couldn't stomach seeing it taken apart after all the effort she put into pretending it was hers. The HOA sent a single rep, a new guy, mid-30s, polite, exhausted, and clearly there to clean up a mess he didn't create. He avoided eye contact. I didn't press him. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to watch justice executed one bolt at a time. By midweek, the site was clear. I had the boundary restaked, re-verified, and installed 2 steel signs with laminated, notarized property coordinates. one every 50 feet, just in case someone got creative again. Then came the second satisfaction. Karen's house, once the pride of the East cul-de-sac, was listed for sale, not voluntarily. The court had issued a lien to satisfy the judgment. When it didn't get paid within the grace period, the bank moved to foreclosure. 6 months later, I got a phone call from an old Navy buddy turned real estate investor. "You still want that lot next to you?" "Depends. What's the name on the title?" "Karen Murray." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. We made it official through a third-party LLC. Clean, legal, untraceable until the ink dried. The sale went through at auction for a fraction of its estimated value. The HOA was too financially crippled to bid. Karen had defaulted on her dues. Her attorney had dropped her. She didn't even contest the auction. I let the place sit for a while, empty, quiet, overgrown with ivy. Then I had my crew come in and tear down the fence separating it from my land. We cleared a path, landscaped the hillside, and built a cedar overlook deck right where her master bedroom used to be. I added a fire pit, 2 Adirondack chairs, and 1 polished brass plaque screwed into the railing. Private property, not for Karen. I hosted a few friends that summer, veterans, old co-workers, a couple of my neighbors who distanced themselves from the HOA circus. We watched the sun dip below the lake, drank cheap beer, and laughed about how a petty woman tried to steal 18 feet of shoreline and ended up losing everything. Last I heard, Karen had moved back to Utah. Someone mentioned a cousin took her in. The criminal case was still under review. Evidence of GIS tampering, mail fraud, and a falsified police report doesn't just disappear. She wasn't in jail yet, but let's just say the district attorney's office had cleared their calendar. As for me, I had peace again. No drama, no fake claims, no aluminum barn poisoning my view, just lake, sky, and silence. Exactly the way I bought it.